The phone slipped from Maya's trembling hands, clattering against the cracked linoleum floor of her tiny apartment kitchen. She had just sent the most important text of her life to the wrong number. Not just any wrong number, but a message meant for her landlord, Mr. Henderson, begging for one more week to pay rent, explaining that her twins needed medicine and she'd just lost her second job. Instead, it had gone to a number she'd accidentally saved under the wrong name after a brief encounter at the hospital 3 months ago, when a stranger in an expensive suit had helped her carry her sick children inside. She never imagined that stranger was Alexander Chen, the tech billionaire whose face graced magazine covers and business news segments. And she certainly never imagined he'd respond. Maya Rodriguez had learned early that life wasn't fair. At 28, she'd already buried her husband, raised twin 4-year-olds alone, and worked herself to exhaustion at jobs that barely covered the bills. Tonight, standing in her cramped kitchen with peeling wallpaper and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, she felt the weight of every decision, every sacrifice, pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. Her phone buzzed. She bent to retrieve it with shaking hands, expecting a confused response or worse, no response at all. What she saw made her heart stop. Address: I'm sending a car. We need to talk about the twins. Maya read the message 3 times, her mind racing through possibilities. Who was this? Then she checked the contact name, her blood running cold. This wasn't Mr. Henderson. This was the man from the hospital, the one who'd insisted on paying for her parking that day when Emma and Ethan had both come down with pneumonia. She'd been so frazzled, so overwhelmed, that she'd barely registered his kindness beyond a hurried thank you. She'd saved his number thinking he was someone from the hospital administration. How had she made such a catastrophic mistake? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should explain, apologize, tell him it was a mistake. But something stopped her. The way he'd phrased it, we need to talk about the twins, as if he knew them, as if this was somehow meant to be. Before she could second guess herself, another message appeared. The limo will be there in 15 minutes. Don't worry about the kids. I'm sending a certified nanny to stay with them. You're safe, Maya. I promise. How did he know her name? How did he know she had twins? The memory hit her then, sharp and clear. At the hospital, delirious with worry, she talked to him while they waited for the doctor. She told him everything, the words pouring out to this stranger who'd shown her a moment of kindness when she desperately needed it. She told him about losing David in a construction accident 2 years ago, about the twins who were her entire world, about the jobs she juggled and the rent she couldn't pay. She told him things she'd never told anyone, and then she'd forgotten all about it in the chaos of sick children and mounting medical bills. Maya looked around her apartment, at the toys scattered across the worn carpet, at the stack of bills on the counter marked with increasingly urgent red stamps, at the photo of David on the wall, forever young, forever smiling. What did she have to lose? She texted back her address. 14 minutes later, a sleek black limousine pulled up outside her building. Maya watched from the window, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The twins were asleep in their shared bedroom, their small bodies curled together like they'd been in the womb, finding comfort in each other the way they always had. A woman in professional attire emerged from the limo, carrying credentials that she showed to Maya through the door camera, a certified childcare specialist with impeccable references. Maya hesitated for only a moment before letting her in. Mr. Chen wanted to ensure you felt comfortable leaving, the woman said with a warm smile. I have 3 children of my own. I understand. Maya kissed her sleeping twins, whispered a prayer she didn't quite believe in anymore, and stepped into the limousine. The interior was like nothing she'd ever experienced, all soft leather and subtle lighting, a stark contrast to her rusty Honda that had finally died last month. As the car glided through the city streets, moving from her struggling neighborhood toward the gleaming downtown skyscrapers, Maya felt like Cinderella, except there was no ball waiting, only a conversation she couldn't begin to predict. They pulled up to a building that seemed to touch the clouds, all glass and steel reflecting the city lights. A private elevator took her to the top floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawling below like a carpet of stars. And there, standing with his back to her, looking out at the view, was Alexander Chen. He turned as she entered, and she recognized him immediately. He was younger than she'd remembered, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with his sharp suit and obvious wealth. But it was his expression that surprised her most. He didn't look angry or confused. He looked sad. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. "Please, sit." Maya perched on the edge of an expensive-looking chair, her target clearance outfit feeling shabby in the opulent surroundings. "I'm so sorry," she began. "I didn't mean to text you. It was supposed to go to my landlord. I was asking for more time to pay rent and I know," Alexander interrupted gently. "And I'm glad you did." "Maya, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." He sat across from her, leaning forward with his hands clasped. "After we met at the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about your situation. I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds, and I apologize for the invasion of privacy, but I needed to understand. Your husband, David Rodriguez, worked for a construction company that was a subsidiary of one of my corporations." Maya's breath caught. She hadn't known that. David had worked for Jensen Construction, had died when scaffolding collapsed due to what the company called equipment failure. "The investigation into his death was mishandled," Alexander continued, his voice heavy with something that sounded like guilt. "There were safety violations that were covered up. The scaffolding failure wasn't equipment failure. It was negligence by site management, and that negligence was buried to avoid liability. Your husband should never have been on that scaffold. He should never have died." Tears streamed down Maya's face. She'd known, somehow she'd always known there was more to the story, but she'd been too overwhelmed with grief and survival to push for answers. "I didn't know about the cover-up until 2 months ago," Alexander said. "When I found out, I started dismantling the entire management structure responsible. But that doesn't bring David back. It doesn't undo what happened to you and your children. When I met you at the hospital, when you told me your story, I realized you were the widow from that case. The one I'd been trying to find to make things right." "Why?" Maya whispered. "Why do you care? You could have just paid me off quietly, made this go away." Alexander stood and walked to the window, his silhouette outlined against the glittering city. "Because 7 years ago, my sister died in a factory fire. The company that owned that factory cut corners on safety to save money. They paid a settlement to my family, and everyone moved on. Except I never moved on. I built my company with one promise, that no one under my corporate umbrella would ever suffer because someone valued profit over people. I failed your family. I failed David." The weight of his words settled in the room. This wasn't about charity or pity. This was about accountability, about a man trying to live up to a promise he'd made to someone he'd loved and lost. "I've set up a trust for Emma and Ethan," Alexander said, turning back to face her. "It will cover their education through college, their medical expenses, and provide a monthly stipend to ensure you never have to choose between rent and medicine again. Your current debts, including medical bills and back rent, have been cleared. I've also purchased a home in a good school district and put it in your name, no strings attached." Maya couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I don't want your money," she heard herself say, even as a voice in her head screamed at her to shut up and say thank you. "I don't want charity. I want to provide for my children myself." Alexander smiled, and it transformed his face from businessman to human. "I was hoping you'd say that. I have a proposition. My company needs someone to head our new family support initiative, developing programs for employees who are juggling parenthood and work. Someone who understands what it's really like to struggle, to make impossible choices. The salary is competitive, the hours are flexible, and you can bring the twins to the office daycare center, which is staffed by the best childcare professionals in the city. I need someone real, Maya. Someone who won't let me lose sight of why this matters." "I'm not qualified," Maya protested. "I don't have a degree. I've been working retail and waitressing." "You have a degree in survival," Alexander said firmly. You have expertise in exactly what this position requires. But I understand if you need time to think about it. There's no pressure. The trust, the house, they're yours regardless of whether you take the job. This is about making amends, not buying your cooperation. Maya looked at this man, this stranger who'd shown her more kindness in a few months than she'd experienced in years. She thought about David, about the life they'd planned, about the dreams that had died on that scaffold. She thought about Emma and Ethan, about the future she wanted to give them, not just survival but thriving, opportunities, choices. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. The text I sent tonight. You responded so quickly, like you were waiting for it. Alexander had the grace to look embarrassed. I programmed your number to alert me immediately if you ever reached out. I know it sounds invasive, but after we met, I couldn't stop thinking about your family. I wanted to help, but I didn't want to intrude. When your text came through tonight, it felt like fate giving me permission to do what I'd wanted to do all along. Maya laughed, a sound that surprised her, genuine and bright in the elegant office. You're either the kindest person I've ever met or completely crazy. Possibly both, Alexander admitted with a smile. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city that had taken so much from her but was now offering something back. Below, millions of people were living their lives, struggling and dreaming and hoping. She thought about all the other Mayas out there, all the other families broken by tragedies that could have been prevented. I'll take the job, she said. Not because of the money or the house, though God knows I'm grateful for both. I'll take it because if I can help even one family avoid what we went through, then maybe David's death means something more than just a tragedy. Maybe it means change. Alexander extended his hand, and she shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone who kept their promises. There's one more thing, he said. I'd like to establish a foundation in David's name, focused on construction safety and supporting families affected by workplace accidents. I was hoping you'd agree to be on the board. Maya felt tears spill over again, but these were different. These were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future that suddenly looked different than it had an hour ago. The David Rodriguez Foundation, she whispered. He'd like that. As the limo drove her home later that night, past the late-night diners and quiet streets, Maya thought about the text she'd sent by accident, the mistake that had changed everything. She thought about coincidence and fate, about whether there was really any difference between the two. The twins were still sleeping when she arrived home, the nanny having kept her promise. Maya stood in their doorway, watching them breathe in the soft glow of their nightlight. Your daddy would be so proud of us, she whispered. We're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to thrive, and we're going to help other families thrive too. The next morning, Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. Welcome to the team. First meeting is next week. Bring the twins. They're part of the family now too. Maya smiled and typed back. Thank you for answering a wrong number. His response came immediately. Maybe it was the right number all along. 3 years later, the David Rodriguez Foundation had helped 15 families, implemented new safety standards across 36 construction sites, and started a scholarship program for children who'd lost parents in workplace accidents. Maya had become one of the most respected voices in corporate family policy, speaking at conferences and consulting with companies nationwide. Emma and Ethan thrived in their new school, their laughter filling the house that Maya still sometimes couldn't believe was theirs. And Alexander, he'd become Uncle Alex, a fixture at birthday parties and school plays. Someone the twins loved not for his money but for his terrible jokes and willingness to play endless games of pretend. He'd found something he'd been missing too, a family he'd chosen and a purpose that honored his sister's memory. Sometimes Maya still thought about that night, that desperate text sent to a wrong number that turned out to be exactly the right one. She learned that kindness could come from unexpected places, that one person's decision to care could ripple out and change lives, that hope was sometimes just a text message away. She learned that being vulnerable wasn't weakness but courage, and that accepting help wasn't defeat but wisdom. The world could be cruel and unfair, but it could also be surprisingly, wonderfully kind. All it took was one person deciding that another person's struggle mattered, that their story deserved a different ending. Alexander had given Maya more than money or security. He'd given her back her belief in humanity, in the possibility that good people existed who did good things not for recognition but because it was right. And in giving her that, he'd found his own redemption, his own peace with the loss he'd carried for years. They'd saved each other, this single mom and this billionaire, through a wrong number that was actually fate's way of making things right.